Let's jump right into this explainer and unpack the absolutely fascinating history of a nation built on a centuries-long struggle against the sea. We're talking about the Netherlands. This is a place where geography didn't just, influence history, it literally forced it.
Think about the central paradox we're exploring today. How exactly did a tiny, soggy piece of land sitting right at the edge of the North Sea engineer its way to immense wealth and global superpower status? I mean, it completely defies logic. But the answer? It's entirely rooted in their relationship with water.
We're going to trace this epic journey through 6 eras. First, taming the wild wetlands, forging an independent republic, the Gilded Golden Age, revolution and a new kingdom, the World Wars and Reconstruction, and finally, the modern Dutch reality.
Section 1. Taming the wild wetlands. So if we look way back, early tribes and even the mighty Roman Empire had to deal with this constantly shifting, marshy landscape of permafrost and river deposits. The Romans showed up around 57 BC, basically using the Rhine as a border, but the landscape? Totally wild. Jump ahead to the 13th century, and we actually see wind power and dikes being used to build polders. That's literally reclaiming land directly from the water.
The crucial takeaway here is that the famous Dutch culture of local cooperation wasn't born out of some grand idealism. No, it was born out of absolute, watery necessity. You simply couldn't survive alone. You had to work with your neighbors to control the floods, and that necessity essentially formed their very first political units.
On to Section 2. Forging an independent republic.
Now, the region actually experienced incredible economic prosperity and urbanization under the Dukes of Burgundy. But pretty soon, these lands got swallowed up by the massive Habsburg Empire under Charles V, and that created a total pressure cooker. We're talking heavy centralized taxes plus intense religious friction fueled by the Protestant Reformation. All of this ultimately sparked a massive, audacious revolt.
Despite going up against the incredibly mighty Spanish Catholic monarchs, the rebels basically used their watery geography as a weapon. They used this uninterrupted string of fortresses and treated the sea as their absolute strongest ally. Eventually, the 12 years truce gave them the breathing room they desperately needed to repair a wrecked economy and lay the firm foundations of an independent state, setting the stage for some massive growth.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Gilded Golden Age.
There's a really fascinating contrast here. On one hand, you have the idealized beauty of 17th century landscape art, boundless optimism, those famous gray skies, incredibly wealthy merchants. But right behind that canvas, it was a gritty, freezing reality. Laborers were constantly battling the elements to maintain the dikes, and regular everyday citizens lived under the constant, looming threat of ruinous taxes just to hold back the sea and fund the provincial forces. The true economic engine of this era, though, was the Dutch East India Company. They pioneered the very first publicly held trading charter and secured a massive global monopoly. They literally ruled the seas, funneling spices, sugar, and tea straight into Amsterdam's merchant houses. However, as the historical sources point out, this incredible wealth relied heavily on a tight colonial grip in Asia and Africa, a grip that would, of course, eventually spark fierce resistance.
Meanwhile, back at home, this massive influx of wealth funded a total cultural boom. This was absolutely the apogee of Dutch power and literature. You've got thinkers like Erasmus and artists like Rembrandt stepping onto the global stage. I mean, Rembrandt's Night Watch completely broke the artistic conventions of the time. Plus, it was an era of stunning architectural growth, grand cathedrals, and a very famous rise in religious tolerance.
Section 4. Revolution and a New Kingdom. So, the Napoleonic Wars brought French rule to the Netherlands, and with Napoleon came devastating maritime blockades that completely ruined Dutch trade and caused a massive flight of seamen. Now here's a fascinating twist of irony. To rebuild their shattered economy after those blockades, this fiercely independent republic actually chose to embrace a monarchy in 1813. They placed William I on the throne specifically to rebuild their infrastructure. But that absolute power didn't stay absolute for long. By 1848, King William II accepted a brand new constitution drafted by J. Thorbecke. This was a total game changer, marking the definitive beginning of modern parliamentary democracy for the Dutch. This new era kick-started massive industrialization. We're talking cutting-edge railway networks linking cities and modernized urban planning that drastically improved public health.
Let's look at Section 5, World Wars and Reconstruction. The Netherlands miraculously managed to stay completely neutral during World War I, which really reinforced this deep-seated belief in their own safety. But they suffered a brutal existential shock when the Germans invaded in May 1940. They were completely unprepared. The sheer devastation of World War II entirely shattered that illusion of invulnerability. It fundamentally and permanently altered the country's psychological landscape.
Following the war, during the Reconstruction period, all that immense trauma led to a very specific, almost extreme reaction. The sources describe a profound shift toward heavily controlled, hyper-rational urban planning. Architects, who were understandably distrustful of human nature after the horrors of the war, tried to cynically engineer order out of chaos. They created what critics actually called the shocking utopia of the man maze, highly regulated, rigid living environments designed to enforce stability.
And that brings us to Section 6, the modern Dutch reality. Astonishingly, 67% of the modern Dutch population lives in highly dense urban areas today. That is a huge number. Yet it doesn't really feel overcrowded in the traditional sense. Why? Because these spaces are brilliantly knit together by world-class public transportation and a really harmonious, meticulously planned coexistence of towns and agricultural land.
Today's government perfectly balances historical traditions with modern liberal governance. You have the monarch appointing ministers, the cabinet holding executive power, a Senate with 75 indirectly elected members, and a House of Representatives with 150 members. It's a precisely engineered balance of power. And this beautifully engineered marvel of a country is a massive global magnet. Just to put it in perspective, the Netherlands attracted over 18 million foreign tourists in 2017 alone. 18 million. They all flocked there to experience the meticulously preserved cultural heritage, the world-renowned museums, and of course, those famous canals that once drove the entire global trade network.
But underneath all that, there's a truly fascinating psychological shift happening today. The nation has largely retreated from the grand global ambitions of its golden age. Instead, it's settled into a wealthy, comfortable, but maybe overly idealized modern identity. The sources call it the permanent illusion of a nice little country. It's a mindset that actively focuses on domestic comfort and soft, nice daily situations over sweeping global dominance.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. We've seen how the very identity of the Netherlands was forged by conquering water. But as climate change accelerates and sea levels continue to rise, how will a nation built largely below sea level actually adapt? Will their centuries-old history of masterful engineering be enough to save them in the environmental challenges of tomorrow? Well, it's a question the whole world will definitely be watching them answer.